We're going. We're going. It just takes a minute. Oh. Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another College Advising Core live stream. My name is Rachel. This is Lauren and Julie. We'll introduce ourselves in a second. So we are all College Advising Core e-advisors. We specifically help high-achieving, low to moderate income students navigate the college application process. We also work with CollegePoint, the shirt that I'm wearing today, the CollegePoint initiative. We are funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies. Okay, so before we get into any financial aid conversations, we're just going to briefly introduce ourselves. So y'all probably know me if you've seen a live before. I'm Rachel. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I went to UNC Chapel Hill and graduated in 2018 in North Carolina. I was a psychology major, and I'm a second-year e-advisor.
And I'm Lauren. I use she, her pronouns. I went to Davidson College and graduated in 2016. Go Cats. I have been with CAC for 4 years total, and this is my second year as an e-advisor. I forgot to mention while I was at Davidson, I was an anthro major and also a first-generation college student.
Hi, I'm Julie. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I also went to Davidson College. I graduated in 2015 and was a sociology major and a chemistry minor. And so this is my 5th year working with CAC. I was an in-school advisor for 3 years, and this is my 2nd year working as an e-advisor.
Yay! So we specifically played Lauren and Julie just because they have so much experience with the FAFSA and the CSS Profile because they're both 4th or 5th year advisors. Okay, so briefly, I'm just going to go over some general information about financial aid in general, and then Lauren's going to tell us some information about the FAFSA, and then Julie's going to tell us some information about the CSS Profile. At the very end of the live, I'm going to briefly mention some state-specific financial aid applications that you should be looking out for if you live in these states. And if any questions pop up about the FAFSA or the CSS, please drop it in the comments, or you can save it until the end, just to set up some expectations to make sure that we're being efficient with our time so that we can get to all of your questions. If your question requires a really long, in-depth answer, we're going to save it for the end of the live. Of course, if you do have questions, you can always reach out to your advisor. You can also go on the FAFSA website. There's a FAFSA live chat feature, or you can call the FAFSA number. And all of these links will be in the description after this video is uploaded. Okay, so very briefly, the way that you are going to be getting financial aid at all from to college, basically it comes from 3 pools. There's going to be the federal money, state money, and then also institutional money. So the federal money is from the U.S. Department of Education. It's from submitting the FAFSA. And so that's going to be the Pell Grant or loans or work study, which Lauren will talk more about. So that is just the federal money. And then you can also qualify to receive state aid. So this is going to be different depending on each state. Some states have different applications that you have to fill out. Some states do not have applications that you have to fill out. So just look it up for your individual state or reach out to your advisor. And then thirdly, there's going to be institutional aid. So institutional aid comes from the college directly, and that's going to be a mix of scholarships, grants, and loans. So just know that whenever you get your award letters after you get accepted to schools, all of the money that you receive is going to be a mix of federal, state, and institutional aid. Okay, now Lauren's going to take it away with some FAFSA facts.
Yes. So FAFSA, what is it? FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it determines your eligibility for federal and state grants, work study, and federal loans. You'll submit FAFSA to all of the colleges you're applying to, and that will be used as part of your evaluation for financial aid. This year, it's important to note you'll be completing the 2020-2021 FAFSA because this is the year that you'll be starting college. Do not do last year's FAFSA. It will not be eligible or used for your consideration of financial aid this year. So the 2020-2021 FAFSA, and you'll be completing that using 2018 tax information. You can complete the FAFSA online at FAFSA.gov, or this year there is something called the My Student Aid app that is available on Apple and Android devices as another option to complete the FAFSA.
That's cool. There's an app for that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So who should fill out FAFSA? So to be eligible to receive federal financial aid through the FAFSA, you must either be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. You can check the FAFSA website for the criteria for being an eligible non-citizen if you think that's
qualifies for you.
Qualifies for you. Mm-hmm. So everyone who falls under those citizenship categories should submit the FAFSA. There are no income and no GPA cutoffs to complete the FAFSA. Mm-hmm. So even if your parents make a lot of money and you don't expect to get a lot of financial aid, you should still complete the FAFSA to be eligible for federal student loans. Unfortunately, students who are undocumented or have DACA status are not eligible for federal financial aid. However, DACA students with Social Security numbers can still complete the FAFSA in order to be considered for state or college aid. So you should check with your high school counselor or contact your advisor and see whether completing the FAFSA is going to be the best option for you. Another note, international students, depending on the visa that you're on in the US, you're also not eligible for federal student aid. So my advice is to check with the financial aid office of the colleges that you're applying to see what alternative forms they may require.
And Melanie, we will get to your question in just a moment.
So when should you fill out FAFSA? FAFSA opened October 1st, so it's available to fill out now. I will note there is scheduled maintenance that is happening this coming Sunday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. So don't try and do your FAFSA during that time. It's not going to work. So either do it Saturday or wait until Sunday night to get that done. With FAFSA, each state does have their own priority filing deadline to complete the FAFSA, as well as each college. So filing your FAFSA by priority deadlines ensure that you are going to be eligible to receive the full amount of financial aid that you're eligible for. I will say many financial aid priority deadlines are the same as college application deadlines. So really make sure you're paying attention to those deadlines, especially if you plan to apply early action or early decision to any of your colleges. So I say an easy solution is to just simply file your FAFSA as soon as you can. I always recommend submitting it by November 1st. That way you don't have to stress about those deadlines. And remember that the FAFSA should really only take you about 30 minutes to complete to fill out. So what do you need to fill out your FAFSA? So you will need student and parent guardian social security numbers or alien registration numbers if you are not a US citizen. I will note that if your parent does not have a social security number but does file taxes, you will just enter in all zeros for the social security number. You'll also need your parent guardian's 2018 federal income tax returns that should have already been filed, your W-2s, and any other records of money earned. And if applicable, your parents will also need bank statements and records of investments and untaxed income. If you, the student, filed taxes in 2018, you will also need copies of those tax records. You and one of your parent will also each need an FSA ID to sign the FAFSA electronically. If your parent does not have a social security number and therefore can't create an FSA ID, the solution is to simply print the FAFSA signature page and then just mail it in instead. I will note in some situations that students can be considered independent on the FAFSA and will not have to report parent income. But the FAFSA does contain questions to determine if you are an independent or dependent student, so just make note of that.
Okay, also, so the max amount of money that the FAFSA gives last year, it was the Pell Grant, and the Pell Grant maximum last year was $6,195, and which we'll talk about. And then also, is it advantageous to fill out the FAFSA as soon as we can? Yes. Will we be eligible to get more money if we submit it earlier? Depending on what state you live in, yes.
So as I mentioned earlier, the FSA ID, I do want to talk a little bit about that. So that is actually the username and password that you will need to create to both log into your FAFSA and electronically sign your FAFSA. It does take about 10 minutes to create. You can go ahead and do that now if you haven't done it yet to use for your FAFSA. And both you, the student, will need one FSA ID, and then one of your parents will also need their own FSA ID.
Unless you are filing as an independent student, which if you are, if you think you could be independent, please reach out to your advisor for how to do that process.
So how do colleges receive your FAFSA? So first off, I do want to note that you can submit your FAFSA before you've officially submitted your college applications. So you can go ahead and get that FAFSA in, even if you haven't submitted the applications yet. You can list up to 10 colleges on the FAFSA. If you're applying to more than 10 colleges, you'll list your first 10. And when you list your colleges, make sure you're always listing your in-state colleges first, because some states that's dependent on you being considered for state aid. So you'll list your first 10 colleges and then submit your FAFSA, and then you have to wait until you receive an email that your FAFSA has been successfully processed. And that usually takes 3 to 5 days after you submit your FAFSA. So please wait until you get that email that it has been successfully processed. Once you get that email, you can log back into your FAFSA, and you'll be given the option to make FAFSA corrections, which you'll choose. And then you'll just remove the colleges that you put in there the first time, and then add your additional schools and hit submit. So now I'm going to talk about specific sections of the FAFSA.
If you are doing QuestBridge, how does the school list work? Okay, so Nathaniel, you still want to list all of your in-state schools first, and then wait, and then all of your out-of-state schools. So like if you lived in North Carolina, for example, you'd want to list like UNC, NC State, and UNC Charlotte first, and then all your QuestBridge schools. If you have like more than 10 schools to submit that way, then you'll just have to wait, submit the FAFSA now, wait 3 to 5 days, and then submit the FAFSA again, like Lauren was just saying. It's just really important to list the in-state schools first, because some states, you're only eligible to receive state aid if you list those schools first.
But I also think it's worth noting that it's not like the ranking system at all, so the order doesn't matter after you list the state schools first. So all that's important is that state schools go first, and then you want to go through the rest of them, and that order doesn't matter at all.
Yep. Do they have to be state schools, or could they be in-state private schools?
Yes, they can also be in-state private schools, because you're still eligible for state aid if you are attending a private school in-state, but in some states it needs to be listed first in order to qualify for that state aid.
I actually have a list of all the schools. The states that are the most important if you live in these states, we've got Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Vermont, and West Virginia. So it is very important if you live in one of those 9 states, but do it anyways, even if you're not in those states.
Yeah, so now I'm going to be talking about things that you'll specifically run into on the FAFSA. So first I want to make a note for male students. So there is a question on the FAFSA if you check off that you are male about the selective service. And so all men ages 18 to 25 are required to register for the selective service in order to receive federal financial aid. And so if you're not 18 yet or haven't registered for the selective service on your own, there's actually a box you can click that says register me, and you'll be added to that listing when you turn 18. If you're not sure if you're registered, still go ahead and click that register me box so that your registration can be verified, and women are not required to be registered.
Our question, are scholarships a consistent way to get money for college? Okay, so some scholarships, I think the issue with scholarships is that some scholarships, and this is different. This is not federal, state, or institutional aid. Outside scholarships that you apply to, with different companies and organizations, a lot of them are only good for 1 year. So even if you got enough scholarship money to cover the cost of your education at your university for 1 year, if it's not a renewable scholarship, then you would be in trouble for the rest of the years, right? And also, I do think that you would need to apply to a lot of scholarships. I think one of my coworkers said in order for her college to be affordable, and she still took out loans, she applied for over 60 scholarships, I believe. You'd have to apply to just many scholarships. So I think a better way to make college affordable is to really make sure that you have a balanced college list with schools that will give you good institutional aid. And then a way to figure that out is by doing the net price calculators of the schools that are on your list.
Also, file your financial aid forms.
That too. Very important.
Okay, so the next thing I'm talking about is the IRS data retrieval tool. So the FAFSA is equipped with a tool called the IRS DRT, the data retrieval tool, that allows you and your parent to actually import tax information directly from the IRS website into your FAFSA. There are a few tax filing statuses that disqualify you from using the IRS DRT. And in that case, you will just be able to manually enter in tax information into the FAFSA. If you are eligible for the IRS DRT, always opt into using it. This will save you time in the future and help you avoid a process called verification, which I'll talk about in a minute. Yeah. So use the IRS DRT. The other big thing I wanted to mention with FAFSA is something called your expected family contribution. So as soon as you submit your FAFSA, you will see something called your EFC, or expected family contribution. And this will be listed on that confirmation page. So basically, your EFC is a number that is a measure of your family's financial strength. So your EFC is calculated using the financial information that you provided in your FAFSA, and that number will be used by your colleges as part of your evaluation for financial aid. On your confirmations page, you'll also see your federal Pell Grant eligibility and the amount that you qualify for. So the Pell Grant is federal financial aid provided for students that have exceptional financial need. And this money, if you are awarded a Pell Grant, does not have to be repaid by the student. The Pell Grant amount has not been released yet for this year, but it is possible to receive a full Pell Grant or a partial Pell Grant up to that full amount. And last year, I know the amount was $6,150. So a copy of your confirmation page will be sent to you via email to the email address that you provided. If you submitted your FAFSA online, then it will be processed within 3 to 5 days. Once your application is processed, you'll receive a copy of your student aid report or your SAR. All this SAR is a summary of the information that you provided on FAFSA. You'll also see your EFC on there and that federal Pell Grant eligibility again. So make sure you check your SAR to make sure that all of the information is correct. And if you see any mistakes, make sure to follow the instructions for how to make corrections on that form. So the student aid report provides a lot of information, and one thing to note is that if you do see an asterisk beside your EFC on your student aid report, then you've been selected for a process called verification. So verification, all it means is that you're going to have to confirm the data that you reported on your FAFSA. Being selected for verification, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You may have just been selected randomly, and not every student is selected. Only about 1/3 of FAFSAs are selected for verification each year. Other reasons that you may be selected for verification besides just randomly is if the FAFSA you submitted was incomplete or any of the data that you provided on the FAFSA was inconsistent. So you'll need to contact your schools about what additional verification steps you need to take. Usually there's just a lot more paperwork to complete. Just make sure if you are selected for verification that you provide that requested documentation as quickly as possible, because you will not receive financial aid until you get your verification forms in. So the last thing I want to talk about is special circumstances. So since FAFSA requires 2018 tax information, there may have been a significant change in your income that isn't reflected on those tax forms. For any major changes in situations since your parent last filed the taxes, like one of your parents lost a job, the death of a parent, major medical expenses, etc., you still need to submit your FAFSA with the 2018 tax information, but then contact your colleges about filing a financial aid appeal. So the appeals process basically gives you the chance to submit additional paperwork to verify those changes in income because of a major event. Every college handles financial aid appeals differently, and it's at their individual discretion to grant an appeal or not. So make sure you contact the financial aid office as soon as possible if you think you may need to file an appeal. So now we're going to transition to talking about the CSS profile, another financial aid form that some colleges may require in addition to the FAFSA.
Yeah. So like Lauren said, there are some colleges that require the CSS profile. Really simply put, it is an online form that's maintained by the College Board and is used to help determine a student's eligibility for institutional financial aid. Typically, colleges that require the CSS profile are private and have large endowments and are thus capable of giving more institutional aid to students. I think it's important to note that having to fill out a CSS profile can be a really good thing because it means that you're applying to a school that often has a generous amount of institutional aid. I also want to emphasize that if you are applying to a school that requires a CSS profile, you must complete both the CSS and the FAFSA in order to qualify for both federal funds and non-federal aid. We wanted to spend a little bit of time highlighting the differences between the two forms. So first and foremost, there is a difference in who is eligible to use the different forms. So, I think we definitely talked about it some, but on the FAFSA, only students who meet basic eligibility criteria can submit it. So any student who is a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen will qualify for some type of federal financial aid, even if it's only federal loans. However, with the CSS profile, it is available to both students and international students. So it's one of the best ways that international, DACA, and undocumented students can qualify for need-based financial aid. If you are an international, DACA, or undocumented student, I also want to note that simply being able to file the CSS profile doesn't necessarily mean an individual college will give you a good financial aid package, because different schools give different levels of aid to students in those categories. So if you are, international, DACA, undocumented, please reach out to your advisor so they can work with you on creating a list of schools that will give you a good financial aid package. Another really big difference is that in general, the CSS profile takes longer to file than the FAFSA. The CSS profile asks far more detailed questions, including financial information from a non-custodial parent in the case their parents are divorced or separated, net worth of small family businesses, home equity, medical expenses, really any type of asset is going to be asked about in the CSS profile, whereas not in the FAFSA. And so in addition, student income and assets are weighted a lot more heavily on the CSS profile than they are on the FAFSA. Also for the CSS profile, and I did just mention it, unlike the FAFSA, if your parents are divorced or separated, you may need information from both of them, meaning they'll each need to complete the CSS profile separately. So you might be wondering how you know if the CSS profile is required from both of your biological parents. We will include a link of participating institutions. On that document, it will tell you whether or not the non-custodial parent is going to need to submit a profile as well. You can also reach out to the colleges directly. If you don't have contact with your non-custodial parent, or in some way getting that information is going to be difficult, you will probably want to fill out the CSS profile waiver request for the non-custodial parent. And so we have a question: how hard is it to get the waiver for that non-custodial parent? And so that can vary. So just to kind of briefly explain what that waiver looks like, you can also find a copy of it on Google if you want to look through it, kind of as we're talking about it. You'll be asked a few questions about the nature of your relationship with your non-custodial parent. One of the primary one is whether or not the non-custodial parent has ever paid child support. You are also prompted to provide more details in a personal statement about your relationship with that parent. But be aware that just submitting it does not guarantee you won't be required to provide the non-custodial information. Each college looks at the waiver individually and makes a determination on their own about whether or not they will accept that waiver.
So Roberta, if you have any other questions about non-custodial parent waiver, let us know or reach out to your advisor. And our next question, so 2018 taxes are still relevant for the deceased parent, but will it affect the amount of money that you receive? So if your parent has been deceased, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm almost positive that you will not have to report information. I know on the FAFSA for a fact, if you have a deceased parent, you do not have to report any tax information on that parent. Because I had a student situation earlier in the year, and so I reached out to FAFSA directly, and they said, no, not for the FAFSA. What about for CSS? What do y'all think?
That's tough.
Yeah, right?
On CSS, it's definitely tough. It does ask you do have to indicate whether or not your parent is, there's a spot for you to indicate
Yes.
whether or not your parent is deceased.
Yes.
I guess that could also depend on if that's the only income.
We will get back to you on that.
Yes.
Reach out to your advisor, and we will definitely get back to you on that, Jay Quinn. And also for Bright Futures, we will save that at the end of the, after we talk about CSS, we're going to talk about state-based aid. So Nini, we will talk about Bright Futures in Florida at the end. Okay. What exactly is net worth of parents' investments? How would you explain that to parents who do not speak English? a great question.
Net worth of parent investments.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say pull up the definition. Okay, we are getting to that. Video game pilot.
Just to clarify, are you talking about on the FAFSA or on the CSS profile?
Yeah, that will actually be helpful.
If you don't mind me asking.
That's okay if they don't.
FAFSA. Okay, that's actually so net worth. There are some things that assets does not include on the FAFSA, and so that I think is always important to note. It does not include the value of a home. It doesn't include a 401k. It doesn't include retirement. Mm-hmm. It does include real estate, rental properties, trust funds, money market funds, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and other things like that. But I think it can be, and also college savings plans is another big one to note. Yeah. I think the easiest way to explain it, I would say in terms of what is not included. So I think where I usually get the most questions are like your house does not count as an asset on the FAFSA. A 401k does not count as an asset, but if you have like a 529 savings plan, that is going to count as an asset.
Also on the FAFSA, there are little question marks that are really helpful that will give definitions to questions on there. So you can click that and it will actually pull up a listing of what is not included or included as investment.
Yeah. If you have to rely on the CSS profile for dramatic changes between 2018 and 2019, is it more difficult to receive more aid? I would not say that it is more difficult to receive more aid. I would say that you are going to have some more steps in reaching out to your colleges individually and letting them know about your changed circumstances, like we were saying. Yeah, but not necessarily more difficult, just you might have to do a little bit more heavy lifting in making sure, like reaching out to financial aid offices and letting them know about what is your circumstance now.
I will actually note also the CSS profile, unlike the FAFSA, does have an additional information section where one of the things that you're allowed to talk about is if there's been a substantial change in income. So kind of right off the bat, you are allowed to kind of make the financial aid office aware that there has been a change of income. You still should reach out to the school to make sure that they get all of the paperwork that they need, but that is something that is also different from the FAFSA on the CSS profile.
And Peter, for in-state scholarship opportunities, I highly recommend.
Hi, Peter. Text me about that.
Yeah, text Lauren about that. She will definitely give you good resources. But I would also say your in-school guidance counselor, see if they have a list of local scholarships. And even if your guidance counselor doesn't have one now, they might have one in the spring because a lot of local scholarships have spring deadlines. But yeah, text Lauren.
Awesome. So just to get back to some other differences between the CSS and the FAFSA, one of the other like really major differences is that the FAFSA is free to file. It is the free application for federal student aid, whereas the CSS profile does have a fee. We'll talk more specifically about what that fee is in a few minutes. But I also want to note that in case you didn't know, both forms did open on October 1st, so the CSS profile is similarly open and ready to fill out. As we mentioned, schools often have their own financial aid application date. Because the CSS profile takes so long to fill out, it also takes longer to process than the FAFSA does. We highly encourage you to get that completed at some point this month, especially if you're applying anywhere EAED. And remember to ask your advisor if you have any questions about it.
Hi, Aura. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. I'm glad you're tuning in. My student. Okay, so I know the FAFSA gives federal aid. Correct. It's the Pell Grant, right? That could be up to, last year, the maximum amount was around $6,000. But can you clarify what kind of aid the CSS profile gives? So the CSS profile is through the College Board, and it does not provide any money to the student, not from the College Board, like the CSS profile. What it is most helpful for is it goes to colleges that are able to, like most schools most schools that require the CSS profile have large endowments, so they're able to give a fair amount of institutional aid. So CSS profile is really to try to get more institutional aid.
And so just again, like those are scholarships and grants that are coming directly from the college. In terms of a maximum, really in theory, it can get anywhere up to the total cost of attendance, but we mentioned this at the beginning. Usually that will include federal and, depending on where the school is, state aid in addition to the institutional aid.
Yes. Okay. I do not know if I have a W-2 form for 2018. So on the FAFSA, they asked for the amount I earned in 2018. Can I just add up how much money I made up until December 31st and put that? Yes. What was your job? Well, you don't have to answer that. You don't have to. You don't have to tell us what your job is. I'm just trying to think, because like I did a lot of babysitting when I was in high school, so obviously like I didn't get a W-2. I didn't make enough money to file taxes, and also even if you have a job, if you don't make enough money to file taxes, then you don't have to file taxes. So I think just like an estimate to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your ability.
Just an estimate will work.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be exact. An estimate will work. All right. Back to CSS.
So back to CSS. So what do you need to fill it out? In order to get started on the CSS profile, you'll need to log into the College Board website. If you already have a College Board account, you don't need to create a new one. So you just log in like you did to register for the PSAT, SAT, to get your AP scores, and the form will, just kind of be in there. So once you are logged in, the CSS profile will be available from that account. And there are various financial aid documents that you will need to have in hand in order to complete the CSS profile. So you're going to need your parent or guardian's completed tax returns for both 2017 and 2018. You'll also need the W-2s from your parents and guardians, and any other records of income that you've had for both 2017 and 2018. If it's applicable, any records of untaxed income, assets, and bank statements. And then if you, the student, also file taxes, you'll need your tax returns and W-2 forms from 2017 and 2018. So in terms of what schools require the CSS profile, it's used by nearly 400 colleges and universities, as well as professional schools and some scholarship programs. You can find a list of colleges and universities that require the CSS profile on the College Board website. We will also link this, I believe, in the description of the video. And you can check the websites, the financial aid websites of the colleges that you're applying to. We want to note that some schools will only require a CSS profile for domestic or international students. Sometimes they require it from both, but sometimes it's only one or the other. So how much does the CSS profile cost? Like we said earlier, there is a fee associated with the CSS profile. The fee for the initial CSS profile and sending it to one college is $25. Any additional reports or any additional college you add is going to be another $16. The biggest thing to note, there are fee waivers available for first-time domestic college applicants. So note that fee waivers cover all application and reporting fees, and there are a variety of ways that you can be eligible for them. If you qualified for an SAT fee waiver and you use it when you registered, that fee will automatically be waived. Yeah. If you're an orphan or ward of the court and under the age of 24, that fee will be waived. And then if the parental income that you report on your application is approximately $45,000 or less for a family of four, it will also be waived. And it will do this calculation for you in the form. So if you get to the end and it's telling you to pay for it, that generally means that it hasn't been waived. That being said, you can also reach out to the schools so that if that is an issue, sometimes, they can help you figure that issue out. But yeah, so like we said, the form is a live document. So you are determined if you're eligible for the fee waiver while you are filling it out. And if you don't have to pay that fee, you'll just automatically pass that section. There's no code needed, anything like that. We also want to note that U.S. citizens living abroad are not eligible for CSS profile waivers. A dependent student's custodial parents must live in the U.S. or a U.S. territory to be eligible for CSS profile fee waivers. The last thing we wanted to just kind of briefly mention with the CSS profile, after you submit the CSS profile, there are some schools that require you to submit the iDoc. The iDoc is essentially a document uploading service that is run through the College Board website. So you generally have to upload things like W-2s, a copy of the 1040, and it is where you upload these documents and they get distributed to the colleges on behalf of the College Board. You'll be notified if you need to complete the iDoc via email, and you must submit the CSS profile before you have access to the iDoc. So again, be sure to submit your CSS profile early because you want to be able to get your iDoc in by the financial aid deadline.
And this is also really important for students who applied for QuestBridge. You definitely want to get the CSS in as soon as possible because most schools that are QuestBridge schools, if you are a QuestBridge finalist, require documents through iDoc. And so, like I said, yeah, you really want to get that done soon. And okay, so we've got
my student.
Hi, yay! Just to clarify, if we got a job after 2018, do we still have to file the information on the FAFSA and the CSS? So no, you do not have to file it. You will just need to list like if you have like saved up any amount of money from that job and so you have it in like a bank account, you would then list that as like your savings.
And if you are going to file a tax return, it will be on next year's FAFSA.
Yeah, not this year.
Not this year.
Correct. Should we include our own income on the FAFSA if we have only done small jobs like babysitting, tutoring, etc.? Okay, Aura, I think that you should, just be honest and like if you have like any an amount of money in your savings account, go ahead and list that. How are we feeling about that? But also,
I also think that like if you are not going to have access to that money during the school year, then you can put zero.
You can list zero.
You can put zero.
You can if you did not file taxes, you can list zero.
You can also list zero. But yeah, like Rachel said, it's not. I will say generally, it probably is not going to be enough of a differential to really have a big impact on what the outcome of the form looks like. So I think that could also be up to you.
Yeah. Like, if you were babysitting and you made like, wow, like $2,000 in a year, that would make a difference. Yeah. But if you made like $150, it's not going to make a difference. Yeah. So you can just list zero. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some state-specific aid applications. Okay, so if you live in New York, there's going to be TAP, TAP, and also for some of these state applications, right after you submit the FAFSA, there's a link that says, would you like to complete the TAP? And you just want to click yes, and just click yes, bring me to TAP. Because if you do it, and if you go straight from the FAFSA website, it will carry the information over into your next application. So TAP, it's a separate application that you have to submit for New York. For Pennsylvania, there's the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, PHEAA. For Texas, there is the TAFSA. Now, the TAFSA is only for state aid for DACA and undocumented students that are living in Texas. So that's the TAFSA. For California, there's the Cal Grant and the DREAM Act. The Cal Grant is automatically linked to FAFSA, and then there will be a GPA verification that you have to complete by March 2nd, but you don't have to worry about that right now. And then there's also the DREAM Act, which is a financial application for DACA and undocumented students, a separate application from everything else. And then there also is Bright Futures in Florida. So I know that we did get a Bright Futures question. I'm going to find it.
I think it was asking when you can apply for it.
When you can apply for Bright Futures? Bright Futures student, submit your question again. Oh, hi, I know this is not necessarily FAFSA. When can I apply for Bright Futures? I am a senior in high school at this time. Thank you for your time. Okay, so for Bright Future, I'm actually not entirely sure about the deadline. We're going to look that up for you, and we're going to find out. I know that Bright Futures, there's also other eligibility qualifications, such as like service hours and I think grades. But also reach out to your advisor, and we will definitely they will let you know specifically if you have a specific Bright Futures question. Please text or email your advisor.
Okay, so I do know with Bright Futures, you do have to submit. There is a separate application for Bright Futures. You have definitely more time to submit it.
Yes.
So I believe as long as you get that, so it's called the Florida Financial Aid Application, FFAA. It is a website that you have to go and log into and create an account, do the whole thing. There are also other programs in Florida you can be eligible for, so just make sure that you read through those as you're filling out the application. You need to submit it before August 31st after you graduate from high school. That being said, I think kind of as soon as you're in a place where, you have all your hours that are required, you have, the GPA and test scores that you want, I would go ahead and get that submitted so that that award is listed on your financial aid award when you get it. Because if you wait, it's not going to show up in your account until later.
Okay, we have a couple of questions now. For QuestBridge, is there a certain, Rose, hi Rose. For QuestBridge, is there a certain date we have to have FAFSA and CSS done by? Yes, November 1st.
Yes.
November 1st, all of the schools that you ranked through QuestBridge, if you become a finalist, they have to have the FAFSA, the CSS, and also any supporting documents through iDoc. So of course, get that done ASAP.
My student.
And I will also just for QuestBridge, I think it's important to note not all the QuestBridge schools use the iDoc. For example, Princeton and UPenn have their own uploading system. And so similarly, though, that needs to be complete by November 1st.
Okay, so now we got, does the EFC on the FAFSA apply for other schools outside of Florida?
So every college that you list on your FAFSA, they will get a copy of your FAFSA and see your EFC. So it's for any college that you list, not just state specific.
correct. Is it all right if I round numbers for finances if I cannot find the specific amount?
If you, for your tax forms, if you're on the FAFSA, again, hopefully you can use the DRT. It will automatically pull that information for you. And once that's pulled, you should not touch those boxes. Let them, you won't be able to see what the numbers say. I will also note that. That's a new security feature they added last year because there's some drama before. But I would say generally speaking, yes, it is okay. Just know at some point, if you do not use the DRT, you are going to be verified. It pretty much happens almost every time. And what that means is you're going to have to provide a copy of those documents. Yeah. So generally speaking, you're going to want to try to use the DRT on the FAFSA. Yeah. Again, though, if you're filling them out, yes, it is okay to use an estimate. Just know that you're going to have to provide those documents. Yeah. And then with the CSS, the iDoc could in theory take care of that. But if you use an estimate, they're probably going to ask you for that, even if you don't have what is the word I was just looking for? Ooh, lost my train of thought.
Unsure, but the DRT is the data retrieval tool. So on the FAFSA specifically.
And it's basically, you get on there and it links you to the IRS to import tax information directly from the IRS website.
So, okay, C grade 233. What forms do I use on FAFSA if my parent isn't required to file taxes? Can you give us some more information? Because unsure. It depends. It depends on your situation. Sorry, I know that's the answer to so many college questions is it depends. But we will find the answer for you. Nathaniel, so I know I alluded to this earlier, but since we don't know about QuestBridge finalist status until the 16th, is it fine if we list schools on the FAFSA that we may end up not applying to? Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Because all that happens is if they get a copy of your FAFSA and you don't end up applying, they just don't look at your FAFSA and they get rid of it.
They get rid of it. Yeah. Not a big deal.
I do also just want to go back briefly to what forms do you use if your parent isn't required to file taxes. Like we said, there are a couple different ones you can use, but just to give some examples, W-2, what you're going to select is not going to file. Like when you get to it's going to ask a question like, what tax return did they file? You say not going to file. There are questions about things like unemployment benefits that have been received, about Social Security, about disability, all those things. So if that's the type of income you do have, that's what you would put. But otherwise, you would just go off of a W-2 in the case that a parent doesn't make enough money that they need to file. Those are generally the forms that you're going to be looking at.
Okay, I was about to ask the same thing. Will it make any difference or have any effect if that happens?
That was in reference to QuestBridge.
Oh, that was in reference to QuestBridge. Yeah, okay, we answered that. I asked this earlier, and I'm sorry if you answered already. Do you get more money for going to state schools? Because I heard that schools want to keep people in their states. Thanks.
I think that can depend. You're not going to necessarily get more money.
No.
But what I would say is that the amount of financial aid that you get can depend a lot on your family's financial situation. And so, for example, state schools sometimes will be your most affordable option, whereas sometimes you'll get way more money at a private school that meets 100% of need, for example, than you would to go to a state school that might include loans in their financial aid package.
Yeah.
So that is just going to depend.
Yeah.
Depend a lot.
And also for in-state schools, I mean, you already are going to be, like, you already have the advantage of qualifying for in-state tuition, right? So definitely still apply to your in-state schools. If you want an exact estimate of how much financial aid an in-state school will be able to give you, please do the net price calculator. I'm going to type that out. If you just Google your school's name and then write net price calculator, then it'll come up and you can go through. It does not save this information anywhere. It's just an estimate for you of how much financial aid that school would be able to give you. Okay, can the FAFSA give you a full ride scholarship? No, it cannot. The FAFSA can only give you the Pell Grant, and the Pell Grant is last year, the maximum was up to $6,195. That being said, we don't. The amount for this year has not been released. So, but last year, the maximum that you could receive from doing the FAFSA itself was $6,000. If not, how can you get a full ride?
Well, I think that, again, you know, especially like a lot of what we're talking about today is definitely need-based financial aid, not as much merit-based. So like there is a difference there, right? In terms of need-based, and we're typing in some of this answer, but you'll want to apply to schools that meet 100% of financial need. And so what that means is they've made a promise that if you go, you fill out these forms and your EFC is still a 0, that your entire cost of tuition could be covered. Again, it will likely be using a combination of federal, state, and institutional money. But in theory, that you could, then go to that school without having to pay anything to go. Your other option is also looking at scholarships that are merit-based. There are a lot of institutions that offer institutional scholarships that I would definitely encourage you to look at, in addition to looking at what we call outside scholarships that come from outside organizations.
Here is the link to complete the CSS profile. That's it, cssprofile.collegeboard.org. Unsure of where you are clicking, Aura, but that is the correct link to fill out the CSS. Also, one other thing that I would just want to mention is that I know that a lot of these private institutions, such as like Ivy Leagues and Ivy equivalents, their sticker price is really scary, like $60,000, $70,000 a year. And of course, how can I afford that, right? But they are very good at providing financial need for low-income students. So if you think that could be you, please do the net price calculator.
Okay. Can I edit information after you submit the FAFSA? Yes, you can make corrections to your FAFSA.
Yes.
That is possible.
I know you mentioned you were uncertain about CSS and their stance on the 2018 tax information to deceased parents, but in the case that they want it, how could I possibly obtain that?
Okay, so I would say if so my interpretation about the other question was that the parent has died since 2018, but like that there is financial information from 2018. I could be wrong. So if that person is still on here and you want to correct me, please do. But in the case that you can't access that or information, I don't think it's going to ask you for financial information. I'm pretty certain is only going to ask for financial information for living parents.
Melanie, I know I'm late on this, but typically do schools expect the non-custodial parent to be able to pay half of tuition? How heavily weighted is the income of the non-custodial parent? So unfortunately, according to like the CSS profile and the College Board, they are looking at your non-custodial parent income as income that you have access to. Now, we know that that's not always the case, right? Like just because your non-custodial parent makes a certain amount, we know that that non-custodial parent doesn't mean that they're going to share it with you. I would recommend, if you're worried about that, and you can also ask your advisor to facilitate this, but having an open discussion with your non-custodial parent, if it is safe to do so, and just basically letting them know like, hey, your income is going to like impact the amount of aid that I'm eligible for. And I would also highly recommend looking into schools that do not require the non-custodial parent form. There are a couple. So there are schools that when you submit the CSS profile, it doesn't require non-custodial parent. And I would maybe even focus on those schools. Also, Aura, what do I click once I'm on that page?
Sign in.
You click sign into fall 2020, spring 2021. And
you have to sign in.
You have to sign in with your username and password. I could sign into my College Board account. I think I still have access to it from high school. But Aura, reach out to me. I will help you. Yeah. I will help you with this. Hello, how does the FAFSA application use the list of colleges that we are interested in? Will anything be affected if you change your mind about a school or if you want to add another school?
So the list of colleges that you put on your FAFSA, those are all the schools that are going to receive a copy of your FAFSA. Yes. So if you end up applying to that school, submit an application. If you are accepted, they'll then evaluate your FAFSA and put together a financial aid package for you. So if you change your mind about a school or want to add another school, you can actually, if you've already submitted your FAFSA, you can just log back in and make corrections and add the schools to your list. And then if you don't end up applying to some of the schools you listed on FAFSA, it doesn't matter. They just won't look at your FAFSA.
Yep. Is the FAFSA the main way to save money? I'm not sure if it will be enough to fund my college tuition. So that's a great question. And the FAFSA is definitely, if you are eligible to complete the FAFSA, it is really the best way so that you can ensure that you are receiving all of the financial aid that you're eligible for, both federal, state, and institutional/college money. And of course, college affordability, it really starts with having a balanced college list. I'm not gonna lie. So if you're worried about affordability, please reach out to your advisor and ask them if they think you have a balanced list. And also do net price calculators for sure, because that is going to be the best way that you can see if a school is going to be affordable for you. For example, I had a student last year who, Yale is like, God, I don't know, like $65,000 a year. I don't know if that's right. I just pulled that. But she did the net price calculator and basically found out that if she got accepted to Yale, they would pay her $60,000 in scholarships and grants, and she would only be like liable to cover the remaining $5,000. So she was like, wow, I could apply to this institution. Oh, literally love and appreciate all y'all do. We love you too and appreciate you. We do this for y'all. Yes, Aura, I will reach out to you. It might be tomorrow. It might be tomorrow.
I need your help on this one.
So I have one quick question. Is it letting you log into your account? Like, is it letting you log into your account? Because if it isn't, then that's an issue. Could you please tell me more about the application evaluation process?
So I'm assuming you're asking about how they evaluate you for financial aid. So what colleges are essentially looking at is they're going to be looking at all of the sources of income for your household. And a lot happens behind the scenes, so I can't give you like a specifics of what it looks like inside like the financial aid office as they're evaluating students, but they are looking to see like what income does your family have, and then your EFC is your expected family contribution. So that gives them, based on that FAFSA EFC and then the CSS profile, you'll actually get an EFC from that as well that you won't see, but colleges determine. And so they're looking at that EFC to see the financial strength of your family to determine how much they're going to give you in financial aid. A good way to, when you're building your college list, is you can actually look and see what percentage of financial need that schools typically meet, which essentially means student John does the FAFSA and his EFC is 0. If there's a school that meets 100% of financial need, essentially they say, okay, here's our cost of attendance, here's what John's EFC is, subtract those numbers, and essentially if they meet 100%, that's going to be a student who's going to get a significant amount of financial aid to cover most, if not all, of that financial aid. So check out percentage need met of your college's fund.
Gotcha. Okay. We have information for you.
All right, so just to briefly go back to our conversation about deceased parents. On the CSS profile, once you click that a parent has been deceased, they will no longer ask you information about that parent. So that is just kind of universally true about the CSS profile. If you have a deceased parent, you will not have to provide their information after you like list them as a parent, if that makes sense. Yes.
Oh, sure, shout out.
Also, Trey, we love you. And also, yes, a lot of scholarship organizations may also require you to send your student aid report, the SAR, to determine your eligibility for their award. So the FAFSA is super important. I totally agree. And you will get a PDF copy of your SAR. They will email it to you for sure, using the email address that you use to create your FSA ID.
You also probably be mailed a copy.
Yeah,
you're doing that for a while.
Interesting. What is TAP? So TAP is a New York specific scholarship, or it's state-based aid, state-based need-based financial aid. So if you live in the state of New York, it's just you should fill out TAP. For state aid such as TAP, firstly, how much do they typically dole? I believe last year the maximum of TAP was around $5,000. It was similar to the Pell Grant. Secondly, if you qualify, you can only use it if you choose to attend an in-state institution. Yes, so a lot of this in-state aid only will count for in-state institutions.
And that's true across the board. If you get state-based financial aid, that is only going to be used in your home state. You can't get state-based aid in a state you're not a resident of.
Also, Aura, this is an interesting problem. I will follow up with you about this. I don't know what saying URL requested cannot be found. Gosh, I'm so sorry. Try maybe Googling, like, apply to CSS Profile. See if you can find a new link. What forms of information do you need to fill out CSS? 2017 parent tax information, 2018 parent tax information. So tax returns for 2017, 2018, W-2s from 2017 and 2018, records of untaxed income, assets, bank statements, and also if you, the student, filed taxes, all of that information for you as well. So once again, 2017 and 2018 tax information. Is this happening to anyone else in the live? Yes, anyone else having this issue with the CSS, please tell us. Are colleges allowed to charge you more than your family's expected contribution?
So your expected family contribution is...
Actually, can I take this?
Yeah.
The EFC, it's a fake made up number that the government assigns you. That is how much they guess your family can afford to pay for you for college each year, okay? So like when I did the FAFSA for the first year, I'm like the oldest of 4, so there's 6 people in our family, and my dad had a pretty well-paying job, and so my EFC was $60,000. Now, could we afford to pay $60,000 a year for my college education? No. So like the EFC, it's not necessarily, it's just a guess of what the Department of Education thinks how much money your family can pay for college a year. Now, that being said, the schools that you apply to have no obligation to meet your financial need. And that's what we're talking about when we say, look up what the percent need met of a college is. Like if a school only meets 50% of like need-based aid, then that means that they would likely not be affordable. They would only, like if your EFC was like, let's say $5,000 and the school costs $50,000, then that means that, 50,000 minus 5,000, 45,000, but that means they would only need half of $45,000. So you would still be like, have to pay $20,000. So colleges can charge you more than the EFC. Can Bright Futures be used for things other than tuition, such as room and board?
I don't. Ooh,
God,
that's a really good question.
Let's text Sydney.
I was going to say, I would have to I'm gonna double check on that really quick. I'm inclined
or text Sydney or Delisha or go on Slack. I don't think so. I'm almost positive that Bright Futures is only tuition and
for
fees.
Tuition and fees.
When is the CSS due? So the CSS, it depends on the school. Different schools have different deadlines for the CSS profile. If you are a QuestBridge finalist, the CSS Profile and FAFSA are both due on November 1st. And we really do recommend getting in the CSS as soon as possible, especially if you're applying early action or early decision. Can you apply for state aid once you reside in the college later? So if I went to California for college, can I apply for state aid there? No. You would need a permanent residence address for a whole year. And when you're in college, you're only living there from August to May. So it's not a year. So you would not be able to get in-state tuition.
And I also want to add state aid also can get complicated pretty quick. A lot of them require you to establish a domicile. And like what that means is like you have to, like, first of all, that can depend on a state to state basis, but you generally need to be able to provide evidence that you've lived at a permanent address there for 12 months consistently, including things like having utilities. And then there are some states that like you can't move to the state for the purpose of education. Like that does not qualify. Like if that's why you move to that state, that means that you like can't establish a domicile for tuition purposes. But it varies by state, so you'd have to look into the state specific requirements.
Okay, Rose, if there was a significant change in income between 2017 and 2018 on your tax income forms, there is an additional information section on the CSS profile where you can explain that. So explain what is the significant change. Peter.
Hi again. So some schools only require the FAFSA, and then other schools may require the FAFSA and CSS profile. Reach out to me, and we can talk about that list of schools.
Do more than tuition.
So do FAFSA for all your colleges, CSS only for the schools that require it.
In addition to your FAFSA.
Yes, in addition to FAFSA. And then Trey says, in my experience, Bright Futures cannot cover more than tuition and fees.
It's only tuition and fees.
Only tuition and fees.
The next one. Are there scholarships or aid that help pay for room and board, or all of these only for paying for actual admission? So your tuition, your financial aid can cover room and board. The way that colleges look at it is they calculate an individual cost of attendance for you, and that includes room and board. So for example, as we got back to like the percent of need met, if they meet 100% of need, that and your cost of attendance includes that, they will meet room and board as well.
Okay, Sam, when it comes to filling out the FAFSA, do you need information for both biological parents or just the custodial and step parents? So when you do your FAFSA, if your parents are divorced, the parent that provides more than 50% of your financial aid is the only parent that goes on your form. Mm-hmm. If your parent that is divorced has been remarried, then your biological parent and your step parent will go on your FAFSA.
Okay, Mickey, that is a specific question. We are unsure. You're going to have to do some research for that on your own. This is just general FAFSA, CSS.
Reach out to your advisor.
Reach out to your advisor. This is just general FAFSA and CSS information. Also, you're welcome, Sam. Okay, so we only have about a minute left, so I think we are going to wrap up. I do just want to say really quickly that state-based aid is usually dispersed on a first-come, first-served basis. So please, 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 it's so important for you to submit your FAFSA this month and list your in-state schools first to be eligible for as much aid as you possibly can be. Also, you're so welcome. For 100% financial need met schools, if I qualified for a full ride, would I get extra personal money? They would only, for 100% need met schools, they would only cover up to the cost of attendance. What is included in cost of attendance? Tuition and fees, room and board, and a meal plan. Those are all direct costs. And then also indirect costs, including books, living expenses, transportation.
But so yes, you could get a refund,
Yes.
but it's going to depend. It will depend on what your costs are.
Yeah, it'll
We
depend.
can talk about that.
I would say, yeah, reach out to your advisor because yes, you can get a refund. That is.
Also, of course,
Thank you guys.
Thank you all so much. If you have any more questions, please reach out to your advisor or leave a comment because, of course, we check this account. And so if you have another financial aid question and you leave it in the comments, we will respond. All right. Bye, everybody. Good night, Toby.
Good night.